What Dolly Parton can teach us about success. Hey, lovely. Welcome back to my weekly podcast. I have to say today's episode wasn't the episode I thought I was going to record this week. But because when I woke up on Wednesday morning, like so many of you probably did, I learned that Dolly Parton had died. Now, whether you were a big fan of her music, her movies, she's been such an iconic figure for such a long time that, I think it stopped a lot of us for a moment. It stopped me. I had both my girls wake up this morning, and one of the first things they said to me was, "Have you heard Dolly Parton's died?" When they, one of the first things I couldn't, it's crazy. Like, they're 18 and 23. But Dolly was 80 years old. She's been around for a long time. And, even though, of course, none of us actually knew Dolly personally, there are some people, I think they're out there in the world, who become such a part of our lives and our culture, that they almost feel like they're part of the family. And I really feel that Dolly was one of those people. Share with me below, what you thought. For so many of us, she's been there for decades. For my girls, all of their lives, she's been around. Her music, her movies. She was kind of like one of those larger than life personalities, right? We've heard her songs, the movies, laughed at her sense of humor. Like she's done that many interviews over the years, and I'm sure many of us, have admired her as well. We've probably sung along to 9 to 5, no, I will not sing for you. Working 9 to 5 at some point. And I reckon it's probably my favorite song of hers. Probably Still Magnolias is my favorite movie of all the movies that she's done. I love Still Magnolias, and her character in that I think was fantastic. And we've watched this woman build an extraordinary life. But as I thought about Dolly and about the legacy she left behind, I realized there's actually so much we can learn from her about success, right? Not just success in business, but success in life, right? And especially for women like you and me who are still building, still learning, still dreaming, and still figuring things out. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today, because it really sort of made me think about all of these things, right? It's not really about, Dolly, the country music superstar, but Dolly, the woman, right? The woman who dreamed like us, the woman who worked, the woman who took risks, the woman who reinvented herself, right? The woman who refuses to let where she came from determine where she was going. And the woman who, right up until the end, was still talking about the things she wanted to achieve. And that, to me, is pretty powerful. And you see, when we look at somebody like Dolly Parton from the outside, it's very easy to look at the finished product, right? The fame, the money, the awards, the businesses, Dollywood. I actually didn't know about Dollywood. Do you know about Dollywood? It's like a theme park. All of that amazing music. Also who philanthropy, like she gave a lot back. That legacy that she built over the years. But we can we can't forget that, like, obviously none of that was there at the beginning. Did you know Dolly actually grew up in poverty in rural Tennessee, one of 12 children? So like many, she didn't start life with money or connections or some fancy business plan, but she had a dream. She had talent, she had determination. And if you've been hanging out in my world for a while, you would know that I'm a big believer in determination, right? Determination is, really a key driver in achieving success. Being determined to keep working towards what that goal is, what that dream looks like, right? And I think that's where this becomes relevant to you, right? Because she had an enormous amount of belief in what was possible for her. And that's why I want to talk. This is why, this is what has inspired this podcast for this week, right? Because Sometimes when we're building our own business, we look at somebody else's finished product and compare it to our beginning, right? We look at another woman on Facebook who seems to have it all figured out, and haven't we thought this many, many times? Her posts are beautiful, her reels are polished, she appears confident on camera, she's got loads of engagement, she's making sales, and you're sitting there thinking, why can't I do that, right? But if you're doing that, you're comparing your chapter 3 to somebody else's chapter 20, right? And that's not helpful, right? Because you don't know what happened in all of those chapters, in all of those years in between, right? You're not seeing or thinking about, those years of learning, the mistakes that they made. You don't see the uncomfortable conversations. You don't see the posts that nobody responded to. You don't see the times where they wondered if it was all worth it, right? And I've had those moments many times over the last 2 decades, back in my direct selling days, and even as a business coach, right? It happens, right? What you see often is just that finished product, right? And Dolly's story is really such a beautiful reminder that success is built over time, right? It doesn't just happen overnight, right? It takes commitment, it takes determination, it takes consistency. I kind of look, wonder if you've been hanging out in my world for a while, I'm a big believer in consistency and the difference that it makes, right? Need some. Those listening, not watching, I did bring a cup of tea with me to record this podcast today. It is the afternoon for me when I'm recording this. Look, I don't know if you guys know about my weekly B-mail newsletters. If you're not already subscribed to my newsletters, let me know if you'd like to receive them. And if you do get them and you haven't seen this week's, go have a look in your inbox. And the reason I share about my newsletters is I shared in my newsletter this week actually one of my favorite Dolly quotes, and that is, if you want the rainbow, you've got to put up with the rain, right? And I love that. It's one of my favorites, right? Because it's so true, right? Because we all want the rainbow, the rainbow obviously being, that amazing place where everything's working and you're making the sales you want, you're making the income you want, you're growing your team, you're achieving all the company rewards and all those sorts of things. That's the rainbow, right? And we all want that, right? I'm sure you want that. Are you going, yes, Penny, I want all of that, right? You want the successful business. You want the sales and the customers, the team. You want to feel confident, right? You want to be opening Facebook and actually know what you're doing, right? I totally get that, right? You want to post something and actually have people respond to it, yeah? Like, this is what we want, right? We want all of these, right? But we don't always want the rain. What's the rain? The rain is those awkward bits, right? The bits where it doesn't feel like it's working, right? We don't want to, you don't want to learn something we're not good at, right? Because that's difficult, right? It can be really difficult sort of saying, you know what? I don't know this. I need to learn this, right? That can feel a bit awkward, right? I think as women, we're not great at asking for help, right? For going, you know what? I actually need help with this, right? If I'm going to get to where I want to be, I actually need help with this, right? Not wanting to, put yourself out there maybe and feel uncomfortable, right? Again, if you've been in my world for a while, one of my favorite sayings is, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And because but you worry about people saying no. You don't want people to say no because, that feels meh. You don't want to, and often don't want to admit that maybe what you've been doing isn't working, right? And yet, if this is part of the journey, right? It's not proof that you're failing, because honestly, you only fail if you quit, right? You only fail if you stop trying. Okay, so if you're still here, you're still trying, you are not failing, you are on a journey to success, right? Sometimes going through all of this is simply part of becoming the woman who is capable of creating the result that you want, right? And I think that's a really important distinction. Because if you've been struggling with your direct selling or network marketing business lately, I don't want you automatically thinking, I'm just not good at this. You know, I'm just going to quit, right? And it's crazy the number of women I speak to who are feeling like they want to quit, right? Because you know what? Maybe you're not actually bad at it, right? It's unlikely you're actually bad at it, right? It's maybe just that you're still learning, right? Maybe it's just that you haven't been shown the right way, right? Maybe there's a skill you haven't developed yet, right? Maybe you've been trying to figure it all out by yourself, right? And there's no shame in that, right? We've all got to do, what we've got to do, right? But there's something incredibly powerful about being willing to say, okay, what do I need to learn? What do I need to learn? What do I need to change? What do I need to do, right? In order to get to where you want to be. Look, another thing I admire about Dolly is that she never seemed to stop reinventing herself. I don't know whether you noticed that over the years, right? She wasn't just a singer or a performer. She was a songwriter. She was an actress, an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, a philanthropist. And like I said earlier, she built Dollywood. Like, who had you even heard of that? Like, I hadn't. But I was having a look at something and it popped up and I was like, Dollywood? What is that? Dollywood was like a theme park, right? She moved into different areas of entertainment and business. She kept creating, she kept learning, she kept expanding. And I think sometimes, I think we put an artificial expiry date on ourselves, right? Especially as we get older. Maybe you're thinking, maybe I'm too old for this, right? And I talk to a lot of women in their 50s and 60s and 70s. Obviously, work with younger women as well, but I speak with a lot of women in their 50s and 60s and 70s who, they want to build a successful business. They want something for retirement or because they're already retired and they're looking for a way to bring in, extra income. And and I hear those phrases, maybe I'm too old for this. Everyone understands technology better than me. I didn't grow up with, with social media, because, let's look at it. It came out in like social media was a thing like from the 90s, right? Um, you know, I don't really understand Facebook. Maybe, you've said that to yourself many times. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this anymore, right? Maybe these are things that you've said to yourself. Maybe you haven't. I don't know. But you know what? Dolly Parton was 80, right? And she spent her whole life proving that getting older doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It doesn't mean you stop learning. It doesn't mean you stop creating, and it certainly doesn't mean you stop being ambitious, right? She was scheduled to do tours right up until a couple of months ago, when we're first hearing about her sort of having some major health issues, right? And I think it's there's something incredibly liberating about getting older and actually realizing that, and if you can actually sort of take this on board, right? And it is, I'd love you to say it to yourself, I don't have to prove myself to anybody anymore, right? If you can take that on board and go out and be yourself, right? Simply decide what you want and then go after it. That is so liberating. That is so freeing, right? And you never, again, if you've been in my world for a while, you're going to have heard me talk about, you will not be everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. Right. We don't find everybody else out there in the universe our cup of tea. So why on earth should we expect everybody else to find us their cup of tea, right? Speaking of which, I am drinking a cup of tea. So another thing about Dolly that I really love, and again, this talks into a lot of what I do within my coaching program, the Beehive, is about you, being authentically you, and building your personal brand, right? Dolly was completely and unapologetically herself, right? There was never any confusion about who Dolly Parton was. The hair, the clothes, the voice, the personality, all of those things, right? She absolutely embraced being herself, not trying to be anybody else, but being herself, right? She created her own brand, right? And realistically, that's what you need to do. If you want to succeed in direct selling and network marketing, you need to build your own brand, right? Your own personal brand. And we can absolutely, laugh about the word brand, because Dolly was actually doing that personal branding long before most of us had even heard those words, right? She was doing it from the get-go, with her big hair, her pink lips, her crazy outfit, crazy outfits over the top, like some of them, with all their sparkles and bling and everything, right? But that was her, right? That was what she did. She understood who she was, and she understood what she wanted to be known for, and she leaned into it, right? And I really think there is a lesson in that for us too. You don't need to become the loudest woman on Facebook, right? You don't need to be, suddenly become an influencer to be successful. You absolutely should not be copying someone else's personality, right? Dancing on reels, not required if it's not your thing, right? If you love dancing, you go for it, right? If that helps attract attention to you and your business, you go, and you love dancing, you go for it, right? You don't need to become a completely different woman online, right? But you do need to become more comfortable with being you, right? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable until you get comfortable with being you, right? You need to learn how to communicate in a way that connects with the people that you want to help, and that's really different. And I think, there's so much to be learned from who Dolly was, and, and what she did and how she lived her life, right? Because I think, like Dolly didn't just have dreams, right? She did something with them. Yeah, she did something. She decided what she wanted and she went for it, and she kept going, right? She did not give up, right? At 80, she was still performing, right? She wanted to do her thing, and that was important to her, right? There's a quote that's attributed to Dolly that says, "Do not confuse dreams with wishes," right? It's different. I want you to stop and think about that for a minute, right? Do not confuse dreams with wishes, right? Because there's nothing wrong with wishing your business would grow, right? Everybody does that, right? And there's nothing wrong with wishing you had more customers. Again, everybody does that. There's nothing wrong with wishing you felt more confident. I'm sure just about everybody does that as well, right? But eventually, the wish has to become a decision, right? A decision to learn, to get help, to change something, a decision to take action, a decision to keep going, right? A decision to keep going, to not give up. And that's actually where things really start to change, right? So, oh, sorry, that sip of tea went down the wrong way. Hang on a second. So, got a question I want to leave you with today. And it is not how successful do I want to be. Like, obviously, I talk a lot about being successful in your direct selling or network marketing business, hence my business name, right? But that's not the question I want you to ask yourself. The question I want you to ask yourself is, what am I willing to do to become the woman who creates that success, right? I got into direct selling back in 2006. Never done anything like it before. Had no idea if I was going to be any good at it. But I got started and I was like, you know what? Let's see how far I can take this. What do I need to do to, keep reaching the next level and the next level and the next level and the next level? Let's see how far I can take this. How far did I take it? Over the course of 16 years in the industry, I built a multi-million-dollar direct selling business. And all the amazing bonuses and experiences and personal growth and everything that came with that, right? So I want you to ask yourself, what are you willing to do to become the woman who creates that success that you want, right? They are two very different questions, right? And I'm not talking about you needing to work harder and harder and sacrifice everything. That's not at all what I'm saying, right? I'm talking about being willing to grow and to learn, to try something different. Because let's face it, if what you're doing right now isn't working, then you need to change something, right? You need to do something different because, why keep flogging, I don't know, one of those sayings, right? It's gone straight out of my mind. But, look, trying something different, right? Asking for help. I was talking about that earlier. Asking, and I think as women, we really struggle with asking for help, right? It's about getting uncomfortable, right? And to stop doing things that aren't working, right? And to keep believing that you are capable of more, right? Because you are absolutely capable of achieving more, right? Something else that we can take from Dolly's life, I think, she left something behind, not just songs, movies, businesses, right? She left people better than she found them. I love that, right? Can the people around you, what can you do for the people around you that can leave them being better, feeling better about themselves, feeling better in their health, feeling better about their homes, whatever it is, right? She gave and she encouraged, she entertained, obviously, and she educated. She created opportunities. She made people smile, right? Absolutely. And to me, that's a real definition of leaving like a legacy behind. We often hear about leaving a legacy behind. A lot of direct selling, network marketing, affiliate marketing companies talk about leaving a legacy behind, right? But what does that really mean? And I think it means largely that like leaving the world a better place, the people around you in a better place, through your actions, through what you do. It's why I do so much free for women in direct selling and network marketing, because I want to make a difference. I want to see you improving. That's really, really important to me, right? And I think that's something we can all think about in our own little corner of the world. My little corner of the world is, the direct selling and network marketing space, and helping women just like you who are listening into this podcast, become more, achieve more, not do more, but learn what the right things to do are so that you can achieve more and be more, right? You don't have to be Dolly Parton. You don't have to become famous. You don't have to build a multi-million-dollar business, right? Success looks different to everybody, right? One woman's success is not the same as someone else, another woman's success, right? It looks different for everybody, right? I was talking earlier about, don't compare your chapter 3 with another woman's chapter 20, right? Maybe your legacy might be like the women you've encouraged, the customers you've made feel special, right? It could be the team members that you have helped to believe in themselves. It could be, the daughter who watched her mum chase a dream, right? Do you want your kids to see your success and that is like proof of what is possible, right? Maybe the legacy is that it's the friend who finally decided she was capable of more because of something you said or did for her, right? Sometimes we actually have no idea of the impact we're actually having on those around us, right? So I am feeling incredibly grateful for Dolly Parton. It's why I wanted to do this podcast and talk about it, because I think there's so much we can learn from her, like I've talked about today in this podcast. Look, I'm grateful for her music, for her movies, the interviews I've listened to over the years. She always, I got lots of laughs out of those. And grateful for the example. I think the example that she sort of showed to so many women of just what is possible, her life gives us so many reminders of what is possible, right? That you can come from humble beginnings and dream big, right? You can reinvent yourself. You can keep learning. You can completely be yourself. That you can make mistakes and keep moving. Like, we're all human, right? We're going to make mistakes. That's just normal, right? That you can have a lot of rain and still believe in the rainbow. Still believe that things are possible. And perhaps most importantly, you're never too old to dream another dream, right? You are never too old to learn something new, and you're never too old to start again, right? So if you are listening to this today and you're in a bit of a rainy season with your business, maybe you're frustrated, maybe you're questioning yourself, maybe Facebook is driving you crazy. Facebook was driving me crazy yesterday. Maybe you're wondering whether you should keep going, right? I want to remind you, don't mistake the rain for the end of the story. It might just be part of it, right? I want you to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep showing up, keep being you, right? And keep looking for that rainbow, right? As Dolly reminded us, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain, okay? So Dolly was an extraordinary woman. Was an extraordinary woman. This is the thing, like the impact that she had, thinking about that impact that she had, right? It's like, oh my goodness. So she was an extraordinary woman with an extraordinary life, and she left an extraordinary legacy. And I want to sort of leave you with one final thought, inspired by Dolly, right? That maybe the question for you isn't whether you're too old, too late, too inexperienced, or too far behind. Maybe the question is simply, what would be possible if you stopped putting limits on what you can still become? All right? What would be possible if you stopped putting limits on what you can still become? Because you know what? It's not too late. All right, my lovelies, that's it. I'm done for today. I will see you next time. If you think of one of your friends would love to hear this too, please share it. And I will see you next week, or I'll see you on Facebook. Bye, lovelies.